Hi, this is Rick with Rage Against the Debt. In this short video, we'll look at how much national debt the United States has and what our individual share of that debt could be. The answer to how much you owe as your portion of our national debt might surprise you. Let's begin by looking at the current total amount of national debt by category. Welcome back to the revolution. The national debt is tracked in two main categories: debt held by the public and debt held by government organizations and departments called intergovernmental holdings. As of December 31st, 2016, debt held by the public was $14.4 trillion and intergovernmental holdings was $5.5 trillion. So as of December 31st, 2016, the total national debt was $19.976 trillion. Intergovernmental holdings are funds that the government borrowed from a government department's surpluses to offset annual budget deficits. The biggest portion of intergovernmental holdings is owed to Social Security. For several decades, U.S. workers have contributed more to Social Security than has been paid out by Social Security and benefits. This was due to the large number of baby boomers that were in the workforce compared to a relatively few retirees that were born prior to 1945. If you've paid into Social Security, you are probably aware that the government does not hold or invest your Social Security money. The government uses your money to pay benefits to the workers that went and retired before you. And if the government still has Social Security contributions left after paying all current benefits, the government uses that money to pay for other government programs and budgets. So where is the money that you've paid into Social Security? It's all been spent. So how will you get your monthly Social Security benefit when you come of age? From new workers paying Social Security taxes and from other tax revenues that the government collects. It's kind of like a giant Ponzi scheme, only it's legal for our government. Most of the non-Social Security intergovernmental holdings are similar. Money the government has borrowed from government pensions, military pensions, etc., to spend on other government programs. The federal government has no funds in banks or investments to cover these borrowings. The government plans to pay them back with new tax collections and new pension receipts.
Last hearing that we had, I was shocked to hear, and I don't know whether it's an accurate figure, but I imagine it's pretty close, that 1/3 of our federal workforce will retire by 2020. What kind of assets do we have set aside to be able to fund our pension plans?
Yeah, I don't have that information in front of me, but we have actually been doing some work on sort of forecasting, looking at that, so we can follow up and see what we can get you on that.
Okay, have any idea where that pension money comes from now?
Well, I presume it's part of spending.
Part of general fund?
Yes.
We have no money set aside for paying.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see where you're going. That's right. We don't have any money set aside. That's right.
So part of the deficit problem that we have will be when 1/3 of the federal workforce retires and expects their pensions.
That's right.
And
There are some who do not consider the intergovernmental holdings as part of the true national debt because the money is technically owed to the government. They make the analogy that this is like a person writing an IOU to himself, so it's not really debt. But here's why it is part of the national debt and should definitely be considered when discussing the national debt issue. The largest intergovernmental debt is for borrowings from Social Security, $2.7 trillion, with the majority of the remaining intergovernmental debt owed to various retirement funds for government workers and military personnel. Ultimately, these amounts are due to various groups of U.S. citizens, just like the Treasury bonds the government sells to the public. Intergovernmental obligations are really debt, just like public debt, and they require interest to be accrued and eventually paid to the public, just like the rest of the government debt. So now, what do you think your share of the national debt is? About 43,000, about 61,000, about 135,000, about 207,000, or who really knows? Any of these answers could be the right answer, but the best answer is E, who really knows. That's because we haven't come to any solution on how the debt will be paid. The best guess is that it will involve both tax increases and budget cuts. But to what degree each will play a part has to be determined by Congress. However, here are some ways that have been used to estimate your portion of the debt. The public portion of the federal debt is over $14 trillion. If you divide that by the roughly 324 million people that live in the U.S., then you get about $43,000 per person. However, as we already noted, the federal debt is more than just the public debt. It also includes borrowings from Social Security and other government departments. The total federal government's debt is nearly $20 trillion. Again, if we divide the debt up equally amongst all people living in the U.S., we get over $61,000 of debt per person in the U.S. But realistically, not everyone in the U.S. can pay a portion of the debt. So let's exclude those who are not of age and or who are dependents or who have no income. That leaves us with a little over 148 million people to spread the debt across. So the individual share would be about $134,000 for every tax return filed. But everyone who files a tax return doesn't actually pay income taxes, so you may need to only include those that actually pay taxes. That leaves us with just over 96 million people to spread the debt across, and each taxpayer's share would be a little over $207,000. But there may be a more accurate way to look at your individual share. Our tax code is progressive, meaning that as you make more money, you pay a higher percent of income in taxes. So the cost of government programs and operations is not proportioned equally across the population. Each person's share of the country's annual expenses is based on his or her income level. Likewise, our individual share of the debt would probably depend on our tax bracket. One way to look at what each of us owes is based on our adjusted gross income, or AGI, that we submitted on our tax return. Any increase in taxes to pay off the debt would have a heavier burden on high earners than it would on low-income individuals. Assuming the same ratio as total taxes paid by each income bracket, this graph identifies your share of the federal debt based on your average adjusted gross income. For example, if you have $25,000 of adjusted gross income, your share of the debt would be about 50% of your AGI, or $12,500. If your AGI is $125,000, your debt share would be close to 100% of your AGI, or about $125,000. And if you're lucky enough to be in the average of the top bracket and have $30 million of income, then you're also lucky enough to own about $75 million of the public debt. All these estimates are just conjecture. Until Congress formulates a plan to balance the budget and address the national debt, none of us know what our individual share or what the cost to us will be. But we can be sure that at some point the federal debt will be our debt, or our children's and our grandchildren's debt. And it can't be ignored much longer without adverse economic and social consequences for all of us. Please join me for the next segment of Rage Against the Debt, when we'll discuss the fallacy of believing that economic growth alone will resolve the debt crisis. Until then, viva la revolution.